Good morning. It's News Radio 710 Keel, online at 710keel.com. And as always, one can, if one is inclined, download the Radio Pup app, free download for your smartphone. Robert J. Wright and Aaron McCarty, Matt Parker off this week, Gary Watson in the Matt chair. And joining us, the facilitator, the moderator of the
Queen Bee.
YWCA's Dialogue on Race, Part 2, Season 2, Advanced Class. Miss Maxine Crump is here. Hey, Miss Maxine, thank you for joining us once again.
Sure. Good morning.
So what did Aaron, last night was Season 2, Lesson 1, what did Aaron and the gang learn last night?
They learned that in the advanced series, they would learn that what the series was in the original was about institutional racism, how to define it, how it works, how to recognize it, and knowing that it is something that can be ended.
Maxine,
In the advanced
go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, but in the advanced series, they're learning how this system was constructed and what made it come to be held so fiercely in the Western civilization. Even though they're going to learn that the system was socially created.
There are going to be people that are going to really argue that with you and are going to say that we've made great progress, we're on the way, racism is nearly over. What do you say to those folks?
Oh, great. They wouldn't be arguing with me. We've made great progress. The reason we're still talking about it is because it's still here. And if we suddenly just let it go underground and just focus on the progress, then we won't end it. We don't need just progress, we need to end it. Because as long as there is a system that unconsciously or unintentionally leaves some of its citizens out, and leaving them out based on a system that marginalizes them by their color, then our America isn't as great as it says it is. And so we don't want to have to just keep hiding our issues. We want to really be America fully for all citizens. And the citizens of color, particularly those who were descendants of slaves, have not reached full status as a group in America. And America needs to work on that. And that's why we do this.
What will it take for us to reach that?
When Jim Crow was legal, the whole system worked to keep that system going. The police officers could arrest you right there if someone said he broke the law, he crossed the line, he came in a restaurant, he sat at a lunch counter. But when the Civil Rights Act came, there was no enforcement, no monitoring put in place. So there hasn't been anyone to enforce it. I don't know. The system didn't ask me how to figure out how to create it. But I know the smart minds that were able to create such a system that lasted so long, so entrenchedly, that has convinced us that these statuses that have been socially created are working, and they're not. And so, yes, a lot of progress, but it's not working to leave some citizens still having to face barriers. The barriers no longer are signs that says you can't come in here, but there's no one monitoring to ensure the full status of those.
Miss Miss Maxine, you made reference to Jim Crow, which was legally, I guess, abolished in the early to mid 1960s, but you say remnants existed for a long time. And I sort of infer that you think remnants of Jim Crow exist today. Can you give me an example?
Okay. That's a question that most people would ask because it's underground, but the results are visible. When your schools, your public schools now, are mostly students of color, your public schools. When your communities are mostly gated, the new communities that are building up, they have associations to protect themselves from people moving in, that the undesirables moving in, and that's usually of people of color. These are things that are quietly going on. When you go in most cities and the bridge part of the interstate goes through neighborhoods that are of color, you're looking at it.
We have that here, and people need to wake up. We have schools in the inner city in our community that are horribly performing schools, and yet we don't want to call it racism. Why not?
Or is it?
Yes, it's racism, but here's the difference. If you think it's racism because somebody did it intentionally, often it was done subtly, unintentionally. It was done through ignoring and neglect, which is the same thing because you measure by results. And why people don't want to call it racism is because they think it's going to make them have to feel guilty or have to blame their ancestors. But what if we don't look at blame? What if we look at it was a system that was built at the time that it was built? Those who built it believed in it because they built it starting with labor to build the economy. So they were able to work out free labor of people to build the economy. So they needed to say that those people weren't white people to make it okay in the minds of America, because America kept questioning, why are these people? And then once they were laid off after the system ended, after the Civil War, then those people have never been really considered necessarily most people's willing neighbor. Most people really kind of think they're okay over there.
Excuse me, Ms. Maxine, but when you talk about
too much of that,
when you talk about the breakdown of the educational system in America for minorities, specifically black people, at some point, do you consider the breakdown also of the nuclear family, the illegitimacy rate, the lower attendance in churches, et cetera? Does that have anything to do with that, do you think?
I think what has to do with what's called the breakdown of the family has to do with racism in that the economy...
Excuse me, ma'am. I'm going to give you plenty of time. I just want to clarify. The breakdown of the nuclear family in the black community is due to racism. Is that what you're telling me?
Mm-hmm.
Explain that to me, please.
Well, during segregation, during Jim Crow laws, I'm not sure on this number, but I think 75% of families of color were nuclear families. And since
I mean, you can make the case that since Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs, that the increase in the illegitimacy rate in black families has increased to what is it now? 70, 80 something percent of black children are born out of...
I think anybody looking at that would really have an excuse to blame people who are of color. But the breakdown of the nuclear family had a lot to do with those social programs, including what Johnson did.
Yes, ma'am, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure. But the breakdown wasn't just that people changed. The institution, the society, the system in which people of color operate. Once the Civil Rights Act passed, what people of color found is they weren't so free. You could go in places, but you could go for jobs, but you might not get hired. You could get hired, but you might be treated in a marginalized way. And all of those things start to impact them in ways that were under the skin. It was in the heart. It was way more than a sign that says you can't come in there. It was worse to be really mistreated and to really get low-paying jobs while the rest of the economy was growing. Unemployment was running rampant for those of color.
Would you exclude the possibility that much of what you might call racism might not be so much based on skin color but behavior?
Well, behavior based on skin color. They were judging their behavior based on skin color.
I mean, for example,
they didn't fit the American model.
For example, there was a shooting last week in Shreveport where one guy shot another guy because he owed him $10. That's not about race in the sense it's black on black crime. That's not so much about race.
And you're right.
That's what.
Well, you're right. That's what people go to. They talk about black on black crime.
So I guess my question was,
But I wonder why are white people worried about black on black crime? You said black on black. Why are you worried about it?
Because it affects all parts of society, wouldn't you say?
How so? How does it affect all parts of society?
Well, you tell me how you're worried about black on black crime. You're blaming, well, go ahead. You finish the thought.
Well, I'm just wondering, why are white people worried about black on black crime?
Well, I just told you.
How does it affect the rest of the community, though?
You're kidding, right?
I'm asking you a real question.
Okay, so your question is, why should white people, Why are white folks worried about black-on-black crime? Because
No, you answered that. You said it affects the rest of the community, so I wonder in what way.
well, first of all, it affects the black community. And the fact that people are dying, you seem to be hanging this color thing around people's neck, and I don't necessarily do that. If somebody dies in wherever it is, they're still dead. It's kids that are dead. It's kids that are getting bad educations.
I got you. White people don't want to see black people dead, but this is a question I have too. In those communities, there are usually few resources, bad streets. They don't have access to many of the convenient institutions that are in largely white communities. And so are white people worried about that? Are you worried about the lack of resources available in those communities that are predominantly black and brown?
Absolutely. We're out of time this morning, but we're going to talk with you again, and I'll see you again tonight.
Okay, great, and look forward to seeing you.
Thank you, Ms.
you.
Maxine.
Thanks for the tough questions.
My pleasure, as always. Robert and Aaron, Field News Radio Time, 722.